In a textile town in Indonesia, the machines went quiet. In a single year, more than 70,000 textile workers lost their jobs, undercut by a flood of cheap imports from one country. Half a world away, in the steel mills of Europe, the story was the same. Plants closing, lines shutting down, beaten by cheap steel from that same country. The strange part? The country putting them out of work isn't booming. It's shrinking. Its population is falling. Its economy is barely growing. So here's the puzzle. How does a country that is getting smaller and getting older end up burying factories on the other side of the planet? The answer begins with the most important number in China today, the number of babies being born. For decades, China wasn't only the world's factory. It was also supposed to become its greatest customer. 1.5 billion people, expected to buy a little more every year. That promise is breaking. In 2025, China recorded just 7.9 million births, less than half the number of a decade earlier. Its fertility rate has fallen to about 1 child per woman, far below the 2.1 a country needs simply to hold steady. But here's the key. A baby born today won't earn or spend like an adult for 20 years. So this number isn't really about China's present. It's a window into its future, a future that is smaller and older, and the present is already turning. China's population peaked in 2021 and has fallen for 4 straight years. By 2025, more than 3 million people in a single year. The United Nations projects it could drop toward 630 million by the year 2100. The nation is aging fast. More retirees saving for the years ahead. Fewer young families spending on a future they're no longer sure of. And a country that is shrinking and aging does one thing above all else. It buys less. So China buys less, and that single fact turns the rest of the world's logic upside down. Everywhere else, these past few years meant inflation. Too much money chasing too few goods. Prices climbing in America, in Europe. And you might assume a shrinking, aging China would be inflationary too. Fewer workers, shortages, rising costs. The opposite happened. While the rest of the world ran inflation of 2, 3, even 4%, China's consumer prices flatlined near zero. Factory gate prices, what producers charge, fell for more than 3 years straight. The longest deflation in decades. Why? Because demand simply emptied out. A historic property crash erased the savings of millions of families. An aging society hoards cash instead of spending it. And underneath it all, Chinese households take home only about 43% of the nation's income, far less than in most economies. The system was built to make things, not to let people buy them. And when demand drains away, prices fall. Every economist knows the cure for deflation. Cut interest rates, get people spending again. So why doesn't China? Because China is trapped twice over. First, it can't revive demand. Cut rates too far, and money flees abroad. The currency sinks, capital runs for the exits. And the real fix, letting households keep more and spend more, would mean rebuilding the entire economic model over years China doesn't have. So, demand stays dead. Second, and this is the part people miss, the factories don't shrink with the population. You'd think fewer people would mean less production. But the glut is in steel, chemicals, solar panels, electric cars, capital-heavy industries that run on giant plants and state subsidies, not on crowds of workers. A smaller workforce hurts labor-intensive trades like textiles. It barely touches how much steel a mill can pour. And local governments keep funding new plants, whatever demand is doing. So the lines run below capacity, but they never stop, because stopping means lost jobs and unpaid debts. So here is China today. It makes nearly a third of the world's manufactured goods, but consumes less than a fifth. Make more than you can sell less than you make. And that gap has to go somewhere. Out. To everyone else. This is how a shrinking country reaches across the world. China is exporting its surplus at falling prices, and the numbers are staggering. Steel exports hit a record of around 130 million tons in 2025, nearly doubling in 3 years, even as global demand stood still. For factories everywhere else, this is a flood they cannot survive. In Germany, Thyssenkrupp, one of Europe's great steelmakers, moved to cut or outsource 40% of its workforce. In Indonesia, tens of thousands of textile workers gone, and the world is doing the only thing it can. It is building walls. In the first half of a single year, governments launched 79 investigations into Chinese goods sold below cost, more than double the recent norm. And this is what matters most. It isn't just America. India, Brazil, Mexico, Turkey, the developing world is slamming the same door, raising tariffs to keep the flood out. The economists already have a name for it. China Shock, version 2. So, is China's population decline the cause of all this, or the effect? Neither. Look at the timing. China's births began falling in 2017. The deflation didn't take hold until 2022, 5 years later. A cause cannot come after its effect. They aren't parent and child. They're siblings. The same model that squeezed households to pour everything into factories did two things at once. It left families too stretched to raise children, and it built far more capacity than those families could ever buy. But the population decline plays one decisive role. It is the reason this can't be fixed. A normal slump you can spend your way out of. You cannot stimulate your way out of a country that is running out of young customers. In 2024, China's births briefly ticked up. The next year, they fell to a new low. Even the rebound couldn't hold. For 30 years, China exported low prices, and the world grew rich on them. The real export of its decline is something else, a deflation it cannot stop, and the walls the world is building to keep it out. And here's the final thought. Today's deflation exists because demand fell faster than supply. But that gap can close, gluts clear, weak factories shut, tariffs force capacity down, and when supply and demand balance again, the force underneath shows its other face. A nation with ever fewer workers and ever rising wages is not a deflation machine. It's the opposite. So perhaps the cheap China shock we're living through is only the first act, and the next arrives under a new name, China-made inflation. The same shrinking China flooding the world with cheap goods today could one day stop being cheap at all.